Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. He left behind a toolbox, a bag of sunflower seeds, and a pair of weathered sneakers under the seat. Everything else looked in place, like he'd just stepped out to stretch his legs. The cab didn't smell like anything but coffee and fabric softener, which was just like Jason. The guy kept things tidy. You could have eaten off the dash. I was the last person from dispatch to speak with him. Jason Keller, 43, father of 3 from Fort Dodge, Iowa. We'd worked together almost 5 years, and even though we weren't close, there was something solid about the man. You know those drivers who give off that calm, easy confidence? That was Jason. He ran his loads on time, didn't make excuses, and called when he said he would. He didn't flirt, didn't overshare, just did the job. I'm Laura, by the way. I work dispatch out of Omaha. Been doing this job almost 8 years now, and you learn to spot the flakes from the real ones. The road churns people up, burns through marriages, bodies, sleep, money, but the good ones hold their own. Jason wasn't the kind of guy to go AWOL. That's what makes what happens so hard to shake. That's what still keeps me looking twice at the map when I see Vega, Texas. It started in mid-November. Jason had just come off a short break at home, spent time with his boys, he said, and was assigned a run from Sioux City down to Tucson. Standard refrigerated load, mostly poultry, expected to deliver within 36 hours. No problem. He left on the 12th, around 6 a.m., and by that night he'd already cleared Kansas, making good time as usual. He was approaching the Texas Panhandle by 10:30 p.m. We exchanged a couple of texts about road conditions near Amarillo, light snow, minor wind. He joked that the truck's heater was losing the will to live. That was Jason's humor, dry and low-key. That was the last time I heard from him. He didn't check in the next morning. I wasn't alarmed right away. Drivers crash at truck stops, lose service, get lazy about texting back. But by late afternoon, when the GPS still showed and parked in Vega, at this rundown travel plaza, just off I-40, I started feeling off. It wasn't like him. He didn't miss check-ins. He didn't linger. I called twice. No response. I pinged his GPS again. Still there. Same coordinates. Third call rang longer, then cut off. No voicemail. The truck didn't move for 3 days. We filed a missing persons report by the second night. Sheriff's Department in Oldham County finally sent someone to look. They found his raid parked perfectly, nose in between 2 other trucks like he was still sleeping inside. The engine was cold, keys in the ignition, everything locked except the driver's side door, which was left barely ajar. His duffel was zipped on the passenger seat. Phone gone, cash gone, but not his wallet. That was still there, tucked into the lower side compartment under the glove box. ID, insurance card, gas receipts, and 1 crumpled family photo. Jason's 3 boys were standing in front of tractor, all of them barefoot and squinting like they hated the camera. He looked old, creased at the edges. That's when things got stranger. Between the night of November 12th and the early morning of the 14th, someone used Jason's debit card at 6 separate ATMs within a 10-mile radius of that truck stop. Each withdrawal was the maximum allowed per day, and they weren't clustered. Whoever was moved around. Fast food joints, a corner gas station, 2 standalone ATM kiosks. Same card, same PIN, and that's what makes it weird. If it was someone else, they'd need the code. If it was Jason, why? Jason didn't have gambling debts. Didn't drink heavy, lived modestly. When you're on the phone with someone every other day for 5 years, you get a sense of their world. His was quiet, predictable. He told me 2 weeks earlier he was thinking of quitting the road. Said his back was giving him trouble. That his youngest son, Dylan, was starting middle school and hated that he missed every game and concert. He mentioned applying for a job at a packaging warehouse in Sioux City, forklift work. Said he wanted to sleep in his own bed again. I replayed that last voicemail 100 times. Delivery smooth. Might stop for a bit before I hit Albuquerque. I'll check in once I'm past Amarillo. It was calm, routine, no hesitation in his voice. Just tired maybe, like always. Then the phone pinged again. Morning of the 14th. A diner called Rachel's just off Route 385 in Hereford, Texas. Google Maps shows it next to a hardware store and a shuttered auto shop. Nothing fancy. A waitress there remembered a guy who looked like Jason. Tall, graying at the sides, plaid shirt, heavy eyes. She said he came in around 9 a.m. Asked if he could sit in the back. Said he looked fried, whatever that means. He ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs. Barely touched them. Paid in quarters and nickels from his pocket. Left before finishing. A few hours later, someone else claimed they saw him near the parking lot by his rig. Said he was leaning against the front grill, clutching his side like something hurt. Shirt was open. Said he looked sick or drunk. Maybe both. When they circled back a few minutes later, he was gone. That was the last time anyone saw him. No CCTV. No verified sightings. Just silence. His rig was towed back to Iowa after the investigation stalled. I had to do the inventory before it got cleared for company storage. The inside was spotless. Jason always kept it that way. The driver's logbook was current, up to the last entry. No scribbled notes. No to-do lists. Just that bag of sunflower seeds tucked under the console. And those sneakers. Faded gray with blue stripes. Size 11. The soles were caked in red Texas dust. There are no signs of foul play. No blood. No broken glass. No fingerprints other than his own. No missing items beyond his phone and cash. But the silence? That was deafening. I called his ex-wife, Kayla, to let her know the update. She wasn't surprised. That's what struck me. Not shocked. Not crying. Just quiet. Said he'd seemed tired lately. Distant. Said she hadn't really heard from him outside of basic texts about child support or pickups. One of his boys said their last call had been cut short. Jason told him, "I'll call when I get south," but never did. Did he plan this? Did he just break? You spend enough time working with truckers, you realize the job eats people differently. For some, it's the sleep. For others, the loneliness. For most, it's the routine. You forget what month it is. You eat cold meals alone. You wake up in parking lots with your neck kinked and your teeth feeling loose from the cost of coffee. Jason once told me the thing he missed most wasn't home-cooked meals or his own bed. It was silence, the kind that wasn't humming with highway noise or truck engines or CB radio static. "It's never quiet out here," he said once. "Even the silence is buzzing." So what happened in those missing hours between Amarillo and Hereford? Why empty your account and vanish? Why leave everything behind so carefully? I've gone down every rabbit hole. Robbery gone wrong. But why lead his wallet? And why would the withdrawals be spaced out and so careful? Mental break? Maybe. But why stick around the same 10-mile area for 2 days? Why not just drive away? People say he might have walked into the desert. That he was just done. That the dust and the noise finally swallowed him up. But I can't buy that. Not completely. Jason wasn't a ghost. He was real. Messy sometimes, sure, but grounded. He wouldn't just disappear. Not without a reason. Not without a trace. And yet, here we are. Every so often, I pull up that stretch of I-40 on satellite view. I scroll slowly, zooming into parking lots, gas stations, patches of empty field, looking for anything. A shape. A shadow. An answer. I've learned something in this job. The road forgets people fast. Company moves on. New drivers get assigned. The rig gets cleaned out and re-tagged. But some of us don't forget. Some of us still look. Some of us still wonder what happened after that last voicemail. And why a man who kept everything in order left everything behind. I grew up on the edge of a small town in central Kansas. The kind of place where the grain elevator was the tallest building for 20 miles, and the sound of trucks on a highway carried all the way to our porch on calm nights. Our place sat at the end of a mile-long dirt lane, tucked between winter wheat fields and a ragged line of cottonwoods that kept the wind from tearing the roof off the barn in the spring. From the county road, you couldn't see the house, just the tops of the trees and the tin roof of the machine shed. My parents ran a modest cattle operation. Not big money, but steady. Between the herd, the fields, and a few side jobs my dad picked up in the winter, we stayed afloat. Out there, you learned early how to work, hauling hay, checking fences, or cleaning the stock tanks before the water froze solid. I'm Sam, and at the time I was 14, old enough to handle myself in a lot of ways, but still figuring out what danger really looked like. That weekend, my mom and dad headed to Wichita to see my younger brother's baseball tournament. I stayed behind because we had a late-night delivery coming in from a buyer up north. A truckload of cattle was due sometime after midnight, and somebody had to meet the driver, get the paperwork signed, and count the head as they came off the trailer. Dad walked me through it before they left. How to wade them in toward the chute, where to sign the bill, and most importantly, to keep it vague about who was home. "Don't mention you're alone," he said, and I could tell by his tone it wasn't just about being polite. By the time the sun went down, the place felt unnervingly still. The quiet in the country is different at night, less like an absence of sound, and more like everything is holding its breath. I checked the lane every so often, looking for headlights, but it wasn't until after 1 in the morning that I caught sight of them, 2 white beams bouncing in the distance. I expected the driver to turn in right away, but when he reached the intersection a half-mile from our lane, he stopped. Just sat there. 10 minutes passed, then 20. His lights stayed put, idling in place. My chest tightened. Trucks don't just park like that out here unless something's wrong, or unless they're trying to decide if they should keep going. When he finally made the turn, it was slow and deliberate, like each revolution of the wheels was a decision. The headlights lit up the dust curling off the lane, and the deep, uneven rattle of the trailer echoed off the trees. He backed into the chute with the ease of someone who'd done 100 times, then climbed down. The first thing I noticed was his size, broad, heavy, probably close to 280 pounds. The second was how worn everything about him looked. His jeans were stiff with dirt, shirt hanging loose and stained with grease and food. The smell hit next, a mix of diesel exhaust, sweat, and something sour that made my throat tighten. "Sorry about the delay," he said, though it came out in pieces. He mentioned a flat, then said something about almost running out of fuel, then added a story about hitting some kind of oversized raccoon. None of it connected, like he was throwing excuses into the air to see which one I'd catch. He glanced at me and narrowed his eyes. "How old are you, kid?" 16, I said, lying without hesitation. That made him smile, but not in a way that made me feel at ease. "Pretty young to be working a job like this alone. Bet your folks keep you busy." I told him my mom was inside waiting, and his smile lingered like he was holding on to a thought he wasn't sharing. I shifted the conversation back to the cattle, asking if he had the bill of lading ready. He shrugged and went to the back of the trailer, smacking the metal with his hand. The gates swung open, and the first group of cattle came thundering down the ramp. I counted them as they passed, wrote the number down on the clipboard. The second compartment was the same. Gate open, cattle out, count, record. But when he reached the third, he jiggled the latch and then looked over at me. "Hey, give me a hand in here," he said. Something in my stomach went cold. I've been around plenty of deliveries, and no one had ever needed help inside the trailer. Those spaces were tight, barely room for one person to move, and unless you were opening the gate yourself, there was no reason to step in. "I'll stay here and count," I told him. He shook the latch again. "Come on, it's sticking." Won't take long. I'm fine here. His voice lost some of its forced friendliness. Don't make it a thing. We stood there in a strange stillness, just the cattle shifting inside the trailer breaking the quiet. Finally, he turned back and worked the latch himself. The cattle burst out, hose clattering against the chute. When he moved to the next compartment, he tried the same routine, called for me to help, insisted it'd be quick. Each time, I said no, keeping my tone as even as I could. My pulse was racing, but I didn't want him to hear it in my voice. By the time the last head was off, he was clearly annoyed. You're kinda stubborn, you know that? I didn't respond. Go grab the paperwork from the glove box, he said. I can sign it if you bring it over. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he climbed into the cab, rummaged around, and handed it to me through the open window. I signed without looking at him too much, then said I needed to get inside. The walk back to the house couldn't have been more than 50 yards, but it felt exposed, every step too slow. Once I was through the door, I locked it, turned off the porch light, and went straight to the front window. He didn't leave. For the next hour, his rig sat there, idling in the same spot. The low thrum of the engine was steady, like a second heartbeat in the quiet. I stood there in the dark, watching his silhouette shift behind the windshield, never able to tell if he was looking at the house or not. When he finally pulled away, the taillights disappeared down the lane so gradually that I kept watching long after they were gone, just to make sure they didn't come back. I didn't sleep until daylight started creeping in over the fields. Nothing happened that could be written into a report. No proof, no open thread. But I knew it wasn't nothing. It was the way he'd tried to get me inside that trailer, twice. The way he pressed for me to come closer. The way he lingered afterward for no reason at all. It's been years since that night, but every time I see a cattle trailer on a highway, I think about how quickly the whole evening could have gone another way, and how the only thing between me and that was the choice to keep my distance. The truck didn't belong there. Anyone who knew that stretch of land could have told you that. The dirt road winding through the state preserve was meant for slow-moving pickups, service UTVs, and the occasional maintenance van, not a fully loaded semi with a 53-foot trailer. It was barely wide enough for two smaller vehicles to pass without someone dipping into the ditch. Even in a pickup, you'd have to fold your mirrors in along some sections to avoid scraping the limbs. But that late summer afternoon, people camping along the southern loop said they kept hearing it. The low, uneven growl of a diesel engine somewhere back in the trees. It wasn't constant. It would roar, then fade to idle, then pick up again. Brakes squealing, a gear grinding too long. The kind of sound you notice out here because it doesn't fit. It wasn't the noise of a truck making steady progress. More like it was wandering. The way the campers described it later, it was as if the driver couldn't make up his mind about where to go. Pulling forward, backing up, pausing for minutes at a time. A couple from Amarillo was staying in one of the primitive tent sites near the bend. They told the rangers it had made the hair on their arms stand up. They'd gone for a short walk along the loop road and came around a curve just as the truck eased to a stop ahead of them. They saw the driver climb down from the cab, one hand braced on the door frame. He stepped into the middle of the road and just stood there, not flagging anyone down, not checking the trailer. Just looking slowly from one side of the trees to the other, like he was trying to recognize something that wasn't there. They both swore he looked drained, shoulders slouched, jaw slack, the kind of fatigue that digs in deeper than sore muscles. They didn't see fear in his face, exactly, but there was something distant there. He didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't ask for help. He said something under his breath, too low to catch. Except for one word the husband was certain about. County. My name's Paul, and I used to work seasonal maintenance for that park. I wasn't on duty that day, but I remember the way the story made its way to me. It's how everything travels in places like that. Clipped sentences over static-filled radios, pieced together by whoever was listening in at the time. First, a ranger called in about a semi on the loop road. Then another voice crackled through asking for location. By the third call, you could hear the shift in tone. No one said it outright, but it was there, the feeling that something wasn't right. When the officers reached him, the truck was parked with its right side tires pressed deep into a patch of flattened grass, half off the road. The engine was quiet, but the hood still radiated heat. The refrigeration unit hummed steadily from the trailer, that constant mechanical sound pushing against the stillness of the woods. Inside the trailer was a full load of produce, peaches in wooden crates, ears of sweet corn bundled in netting, stacks of leafy greens in plastic bins. The bills of lading said it was bound for a distribution warehouse in Oklahoma City. No sign of the driver. The cab was unlocked, keys in the ignition, wallet and phone sitting on the passenger seat. No spilled coffee, no broken glass, nothing scattered or out of place. The driver's side door was open just enough to look intentional, not like it had swung wide and stayed there. And then there was the smell, faint cigarette smoke clinging to the air inside the cab. That evening, the search began. Rangers, sheriff's deputies, volunteers from the nearby fire station. The preserve is a massive, but it's thick. Oak, cedar, and mesquite twist together over narrow trails that fork into dead ends or loop back on themselves without warning. Even with a map, you can lose the road in 5 steps. In late August, the grass grows high enough to hide your boots. The driver's name was marked in 46, out of Lubbock, 20 years on the road, mostly hauling produce and other refrigerated goods. His sister told the news he was reliable, the type to call if he was running 15 minutes behind. He didn't hike. He didn't camp. If he wasn't driving, he was home watching TV or grilling. No one could figure out how his truck ended up miles from the nearest highway, down a road most mapping apps don't bother to display. There were no scheduled deliveries anywhere near the preserve. That night, a few campers reported hearing a truck door slam after sunset. Then, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. They thought little of it until the search was underway. One camper said he'd heard something heavier than a person pushing through the brush, not running, but moving away from the road with purpose. Investigators backtracked through his day. Earlier that afternoon, Mark had stopped for fuel at a station off I-40, about 50 miles south of the preserve. The clerk remembered him because he fumbled his card twice at the pump and came inside to pay. He apologized for being turned around, bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. She said he muttered about wrong roads and bad directions before leaving. The search ran 3 days of full force. ATVs combed the fire breaks. K-9 units picked up faint trails that vanished in the underbrush. Helicopters scanned from above until the heat shimmer off the treetops made it impossible to see into the canopy. When it was clear he wasn't going to be found quickly, the produce was offloaded and sent to a local food bank before it spoiled. The truck had to be winched out onto a flatbed. The narrow road wouldn't allow a standard tow. For months after, his name surfaced every so often. A short segment on the evening news. A post on a trucking forum about drivers who'd gone missing mid-route. But no new leads came in. Almost 2 years later, in late spring, 2 hikers following an overgrown trail along a dry creek bed found him. Or part of him. A skull, caught under a fallen branch and buried halfway in leaves. DNA confirmed it was marked in. No other remains were recovered. The discovery didn't solve anything. If anything, it deepened the puzzle. The spot was less than a mile from where the truck had been abandoned. Searchers had walked near it dozens of times in those first days. Somehow, he'd been concealed enough to go unnoticed. I think about that road a lot. I've driven in a maintenance pickup more times than I can count. There's no stretch where you can't hear the wind sliding through the grass or the whine of your brakes when you ease downhill. The branches scrape your mirrors, even at a crawl. I wonder if he meant to be there. If a wrong turn stacked on top of a bad decision. Or if something else happened. Something that made him step down from the cab, leave everything inside, and walk away. And I keep coming back to that one word. County, the couple swore they heard. Was a place he thought he was headed? A warning? A name? Mostly, I think about how close he was the whole time. How the searchers passed within a few hundred yards, over and over, without knowing. The road forgets people quickly. But the place remembers. It holds on until it decides to let go.